Is that good enough?
Yeah, that'll be good.
Okay. My name is Robert Hazen. I'm a member of the Lac-Vieux-des-Airs tribe in Watersmeet. My Shinabi name is Misquatis, which means mud turtle.
And for this project, we're interviewing people that went to Native American boarding schools. Can you tell us the school that you went to and what years?
I went to the boarding school. It was called the holy name, Harbor Springs, Michigan. It was called Holy Childhood Boarding School, Indian boarding school.
What are your parents' names?
My parents' names were Jack Hazen and Margaret Rose Hazen.
Do you have any siblings?
I had 6 brothers and 2 sisters. I have one surviving sibling now. She's older than I am.
Where's your family from?
From Watersmeet.
And what was your family like?
My father died when I was 6 years old, and due to the boarding schools, they broke the bonds of the family, so we did not have a very good relationship growing up. By the time I got out of the boarding schools, all my siblings were either married off or in the military.
Can you remember much from before you went to the school?
I can remember quite a bit how it was, how our life was when we were all together, and we as a tribe, we didn't realize we were poor, or because we all shared everything together, and we weren't. If we needed food, we would go and gather it, and if somebody didn't have food, we would share it with the rest, you know. So it was more of a tribal setting.
And so would you say that your family was traditional at that time?
Pretty much so, yes. We lived with our grandparents, and my mother was the main cook for the family, you know, the uncles and everybody, and she was a traditional Indian woman.
What about religion? Was there any religion in there?
We talked about the Great Spirit, and we had our own traditional ways back then. And when people, you know, we would have our feasts or ceremonial as the seasons changed. And
what were the rules like in your family? Discipline and rules?
It was always up to the elders to discipline, but more or less the kids were free to run through the woods, but if you got in trouble, you were disciplined. For nowadays, you don't have discipline and no respect for one another, and it's sad.
So how old were you when you first went to Harbor Springs?
I was 5 years old.
And how long did you go?
I went to Harbor Springs until I was almost finished with the 8th grade. At Easter time, they put me on a bus and sent me farther down to Lower Michigan to a place called Boysville. It was run by Jesuit brothers, as they call them. And I stayed there through the 10th grade, and then I came back to graduate from Watersmeet High School. I wanted to do that because my uncle was the only Native American to graduate from high school at that time from Watersmeet. he graduated in 1949. So I considered that a big accomplishment. I graduated in 67.
Going back to Harbor Springs, what is your first memory of the school?
Oh, the trauma that I suffered there was, it catches you by the throat, and you just, physiologically, you revert back to being that little child when you was first come there, and was set upon by the nuns, which treated us very horrific. The beatings and the abuse physically and mentally and spiritually, and it was just nonstop.
So when I ask about the first memories of that school, those feelings are the first things that come
Oh
right up.
yes, it rushes back.
Can you physically describe the school as you remember it?
Yeah, it was a cement red brick building. It's about 3 stories high, maybe. And it was pretty big, and there was a lot of kids there.
And do you remember going to the school for the first time and the circumstances of how you got there?
Yes. Well, it was the summer of 1955. There was a government agent and a Jesuit priest that came to my grandparents' house, and we as a family were living there at the time. And at the time, the Catholic Church and the government had a program since 1844 that gave them the right to take the Indian kids away from their parents and put them in these orphanages to assimilate them into white society. And so their motto was, "Kill the Indian, save the child," and that's what they did. They were trying to break our native culture.
So they came to your home and collected you to bring you there.
Yes, more or less, yes.
Were you with a group of children? Were you on your own?
Well, at the time, they took all the native children in Watersmeet away, and they went to different places. You know, the older ones went to Berga, to Sinnins, I think it's called, and the younger ones were shipped off to Harbor Springs. And, you know, it was very traumatizing that they took us downtown first, all the kids, all the native kids, all the Indian kids, and they baptized us. I went and looked at, just to check on my baptismal record at the Catholic Church in Ewan, and it's got the list of all of us the same day, August 15th, 1955. They baptized us all, and they just run us through like they were branding cattle. You know, it didn't mean nothing to us. They give us an ice cream cone after. You know, we figured, hell, for ice cream, you could pour water on us all day, you know, because that was a treat, but we didn't realize what they were doing. And I told my grandmother what they did, and she said they were trying to steal my soul, so. And that's what it was, you know.
And then they took you to school. How did you feel going into that school that first time? Do you recall that?
Well, every time they had a big bus, and they took it, and they would travel through the UP, like they would stop in Hannahville and Brimley and Gladstone and Sault Ste. Marie. Each time the crying would, you know, it would just stop for a little ways, and then when little more kids got on, the crying would start all over, you know, and a lot of them thought that their parents didn't want them anymore. That's why this was happening, and even to my sister's dying days, she thought that our mother didn't want to, and it wasn't that. It was a government imprisonment, I guess. He was sanctioned, it was government sanctioned, so we had nothing to do about it.
So what other family members of yours or relatives also attended the school?
All of them, I'd say. Yeah, all my cousins and
Were many of them there at the same time you were?
yeah, and the younger ones that were the younger ones, as they got old enough to go, they went, as the years went by, they kept going there.
How many people were at the school you attended?
Oh, I would say probably about maybe 150.
And what was the ratio of adults to children?
Oh, well, there was, we were broken up into like, from the first grade to I'd say about the fourth grade, there was one nun took control of them, and then from the fifth grade up, there was a nun took care of the boys, and the girls were separated the same way.
So what about the size of a classroom? How many students would be in a classroom?
Well, sometimes they would send, they call them day scholars. We were put into different grades, different rooms. It all depends what grade you were in. But then you had students that came, that lived in Harbor Springs. They would send their kids during the day there.
Okay. The children that would be sent during the day compared to the children that stayed there, was there a difference in how they were treated?
No, they were hit and punched and whatever if they needed to. I remember this one pretty young girl, I think we was in the second grade, and she was so afraid there, she pissed in her pants, and she got punished for that. She was supposed to get to stand up and read, and she was so nervous that she just wet herself.
Did you know many of the other children?
I knew them all. Yeah.
You knew them all?
I knew I knew the boys. I didn't know the girls because they kept us separated. Like the girls had to cook and wash the clothes, and the boys had to do the outside chores. And
so you mentioned that there were some nuns. Who were some of the other adults that were there, and how did they treat the students?
Very badly. I mean, they were mean people.
So you have nuns. What other adults would be at the school?
There were a few brothers, they call them. They're not priests, but they are kind of like members of the religion, Catholic religion, and they're the ones that would beat you if the boys were playing, like Indian boys when they're young, they like to wrestle around and that, and we'd get beat for that. And some of them used kung fu or jiu-jitsu on us and beat the hell out of all of us sometimes.
So there were nuns and brothers. Were they under somebody that was in charge of them, or?
There was a priest that he lived by the church there in the rectory.
And was he kind of like the leader, the principal?
Yeah. There was a head nun there. She was the superintendent or whatever, and then the priest had to say so.
Do you believe that the adults cared about your future?
Not really. They always told us we were going to go to hell, that we were pagans and heathens, especially Watersmeet, because we were the last tribe to be more or less discovered in the UP In 1922, they had an article written in a Grand Rapids paper that there was Aborigine people discovered in UP. That was my tribe. We were living out in Lac Vieux Desert there behind Watersmeet, and we just chose to live that way. We wanted to live traditionally, and they said they just discovered us in 1922, and the people in Land O'Lakes knew all about us all the time, you know. But we were more traditional. That's why Berga sings. We taught Berga the songs they sing at the powwows and that. It comes from my tribe.
Were there adults there that the students could trust?
No. There was one nun. Her name was Sister Perpetuala. Everybody talks about her. She was the only one that showed kindness.
And what's her story? Why do you think that she was different?
I don't know. I think she had a little compassion for us. She couldn't brutalize us like the rest of them chose to.
Tell us about how the students got along with each other.
Well, the students, we all suffered pretty severely, so we more or less kind of stuck together, but it was more like tribe against tribe sometimes. Okay. You know, we stuck to our own clans.
Almost like cliques in high school? Okay. Who were your friends?
Well, it was all the people from Watersmeet, you know. We always tried to protect them, you know, and made sure that try to get them up so they wouldn't wet the bed, because if you wet the bed, you were punished severely. You would have to stand with the sheet over your head until it dried, you know.
So you're protecting your clique from the nuns and the brothers.
Right.
Okay. What about the kids from other reservations? Would the kids from other reservations get along with each other, or would they?
Well, once we got an understanding of that, we were stronger than most of them, because we were pretty tough back then.
All right, so you wake up, it's a typical school day. First of all, how are you being woken up at school?
Well, they turn on the lights and you hit the floor right away, otherwise they would come around and slap you or pull your hair to get you out of bed.
And what time in the morning was that?
Let's see, I would say it was probably about 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock in the morning, lights on, out of bed. And what do you have to look forward to on a typical day? What is your agenda?
You'd get up and you'd have to either get down and say some kind of prayer, and they would make sure you didn't wet the bed. And so you'd make your bed and you'd get up and wash up in these big long troughs, the sinks, and go to the bathroom, brush your teeth. They had powder back then. They didn't have regular toothpaste then. And you always had to make sure you wash behind your ears, because they grab you by your ears, you almost rip it off to check. And then you go down and you got to go to church. Then you go eat breakfast. And then, oh boy, we did a lot of praying. You had to pray all the time. I remember, I don't know how many times a day we prayed, but it was all the time. You didn't play too much.
What kind of classes did you take?
Oh, we took regular class like regular schools, You learn to read and write, and
Feel the education was pretty good?
oh, it was next to none. You know, them Catholics, they're really good at educating you. And I had a stuttering problem. You know, I was so scared of them people that I stuttered really bad when I was in the first grade. It took me a long time to read one sentence. You know.
So how long would you go to school, and then when school is over, what would you look forward to then?
Well, we would, once school was out, we would go upstairs and change our clothes. They would either find us something, or we would go out and maybe, they had a big field fenced in, and we'd go play out there if they didn't have any work for us to do, you know. The younger ones didn't have to work right away, but the older ones, they usually had something for them to do. Sweep the floors, you know, or dust something. And
So generally, how did you feel on a day-to-day basis?
I was on guard because you never knew when you was going to get hit for doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, or even if you were doing something. If one got punished, they all got punished, you know, to make sure they got the right one, I guess.
And, you know, taking away all that stuff, what were you like at that age? What kind of personality did you have? What kind of kid were you?
Well, I was a kind of a, at the young age, I was pretty nervous and scared all the time, you know, because you never knew what kind of mood the nuns are going to be in.
What applicable skills and knowledge did you obtain from the school?
Nothing. I learned to read, write. I could do math, and academically we were fine. But as skills were, I could pick potatoes and pick apples, corn, whatever. But they taught us nothing except they wanted to instill us with their main goal was to break the bonds of the family and to instill their religious beliefs. I could speak Latin, but they beat the Ojibwe out of me, and that's why a lot of people my generation can't speak their languages because of them schools.
What did you do for fun at the school?
Oh, we try to play some sports like baseball or just running. You know, we'd have races running, and we used to play a lot of softball, baseball.
What were some of the other benefits of attending the school?
I think it was just the education. There was not much of a benefit of being there, you know, because you were homesick all the time. You was lonely. So every time when you're younger, you know, you miss your mom and your dad. And when my dad died there, I think I just turned 6 years old, and they gave us 15 minutes to cry, and if we didn't stop crying, they'd give us something to cry about, you know. So my sister got beat up pretty bad on kind of because she was really close to my dad. So it was a big loss in her life.
What's one of your favorite memories from that time?
I have,
What's one of your worst memories from that time?
oh, when I seen this one kid, I think I was about 11 years old, and he just got a hell of a beating from the nuns. I don't know, they kicked the hell out of him, and that night he started vomiting up all this blood. It must have been almost a gallon of blood. He just puked all over this bathroom floor. And all those kids came in there and looked, and we never forgot that. Never seen him again after that. I don't know if he died or not. So, yeah, that just triggered. I was in a meeting with a guy that was down there with me. He was down Michigan State. He talked about that, and it just snapped. I said I was there. His name was Tom Byron. He spoke at Michigan State University, and I remember that, but I can't remember the guy's name.
So amongst you and others that went to the school, you have no idea what happened to this child?
No, never seen him after that. I don't know if his parents came and got him, or he died, or they buried him out back, or what.
You got no explanation anyway?
No, people come and go. You don't ask what happened to him. You're afraid to ask.
What kind of values did they try to instill within the students?
Oh, that God was to be feared. He wasn't a loving God. He hated Indians. And that we're all going to hell. And so when we got out of there, we tend to live that way. You know, we drank, and we were very promiscuous, and we did whatever we wanted. You know, we lost our self-respect. We didn't respect anybody else. And our self-confidence, our self-esteem went down. And we were, there was nothing I could say that they instilled on us that was worth any value. Because a lot of people that were taught religion, that God was so mean and so fearful, that we chose not to believe in anything. They didn't want us to believe in Kichimanadu, and theirs God was so bad. So why do we want anything to do with him?
What happened if you broke the rules?
You were beaten, punished. You were made to kneel on hardwood floors and for hours at a time.
What was the standard punishment? Just a beating?
Yeah, beating, or they would just rip at you and rip on you. They would slap you so hard, you know, that they'd give you a nosebleed and think nothing of it or something.
When did you stop attending the school? Or so after what grade did you get transferred to another school, Boysville, you said?
Yeah, it was Easter time of my 8th grade.
8th grade?
Yeah, so that would be about 1961, somewhere around there.
And you got sent to a place called Boysville, which was a mixed heritage place, right?
Yes.
And what was that experience like then, coming from a boarding school with natives?
You had more freedom, and you weren't treated as badly, but you also had to watch out for the ones that are known pedophiles, you know, amongst them. Like the nuns, you know, when the nuns would pick out some young girl or some young boy and have their way with them, you know. And on Saturdays was the worst days, you know, bath night. And as you got older, you know, when you're coming into puberty, and the nuns would come in and wash you up and get you aroused, stimulate you, get you aroused, and then they'd say, "You dirty rotten Indian, you heathen, you're going to go to hell. Look at you, you know, you can imagine what that does physiologically and mentally. That, oh man, God's gonna come and strike down on me right now and kill me because I'm a no good rotten Indian. So.
And so that was in Boysville.
No, that was in Harbor Springs.
That's in Harbor Springs. Okay.
Yeah.
So after you got out of Harbor Springs, and you're in Boysville. Was that sort of the same kind of setup, the same organization with the nuns and the brothers?
Yeah, it was, but it was spread out like a college. You know, there was different buildings, dormitories, and you had rec areas, and it was a lot better, and there was a lot of sports.
A little more normal.
Yeah.
So, how did the time at the school affect you then? Benefits or consequences when it comes to relationships with people and the other people at that school? Did you feel already like the trauma had taken effect on you?
Yeah, I was. I always tried to just stick to my own, and I was. The trust, you know, when your trust is broken, you have a hard time trying to get close to anybody. You know, you can say the words, you know, I love you, or, you know, but you don't know what love is because you don't have any. You know, how can you give someone love if you don't have it yourself? And that was one of the big issues with my wife and I. You know, I think we was married almost 15 years before I said, you know, all these years I've never trusted you, you know, and that was me, you know, that was just that. That's what was broken in me, because you couldn't trust the people that were supposed to take care of you and supposed to care for you. The nuns, you know, they broke that trust so bad, you know, that it was, I could never regain that. It took me a long time.
So you've mentioned some interactions with others from the school. Do you keep in touch with anyone from the school on a regular basis?
Yes, I see a lot of them down at the res down in Watersmeet. I run a healing circle down there, and I try to make them understand, you know, why they behave the way they do, and you know that there's a tear in our spirit, you know, between the Catholic God and our spiritual. You know, we gotta try to heal that wound in us to get back to where we belong, so we can feel good about ourselves.
How do you think you'd be different today if you had not attended that school?
Geez, I don't know. I don't know. I probably would be a totally different person, but I don't know if it would be for the good or the bad. But I think the Great Spirit had a destiny for me to go through all of this trauma to make me the person I am today.
And how do you describe yourself today?
Well, today I try to treat people with respect. I've been sober for 23 years. I go to AA, and also I am right with my God, and I can finally say I'm at peace, and it's been a long, hard journey. After I got out of the schools and I graduated from high school, I got drafted into the service and went to Vietnam. So.
And you've mentioned some cultural aspects of your life, but are you religious at all, would you say?
Yes, I would say I do. I've learned to. I was always shaking my fist at God, you know, you son of a bitch, you look what you've done to me, you know. And it was me that was hanging on to that wound in my spirit that made me it was driving me crazy, and I eventually ended up in a psychiatric ward, and I sought through the VA. I sought mental health, and found out what was behind all my anger and my rage, and it was being in the boarding schools and in Vietnam, and so.
How are your relationships with other people today?
Oh, they're good. I'd rather meet them. I always tell my friends, I said, you can meet more people with your hand like out instead of like this, you know. People don't fear you anymore.
What would you say your values are today?
My values are honesty, respect, and love, and serenity.
And why is it important that these stories be told?
Because people will understand who they are and where they come from, and why they behave the way they do.